he asked me to continue this series of the parables, and once I agreed to do it, he, um, he said, "I'll send you what passage to do." So I waited, and then the next day I figured I better ask him because that was yesterday. So I said, "By the way, what passage should I do?" And he, "Oh, sorry, I thought I sent it already." So he told me the passage, which I'll tell you in a moment. And I said, I literally read that passage this morning and journaled on it. So we both just marveled at God's goodness. So I haven't had a lot of time to prepare, but God has prepared me for tonight. Amen. Um, so I'm going to ask for mercy, and there's a passage in Matthew 25, and if I can get some volunteers, one to read verses 14 to 21, and then somebody else to read 22 to 40. Is that a volunteer? Oh, your voice, okay. So the Matthew 25, 14 to 21. Can you do that? All right, thanks. Sure. You're on a roll. Why don't you just carry on? You're doing great. Yes, that's great. Sure. To 40. Okay. Okay, you could stop there. Thank you. Thank you. Well, this is a familiar parable, I think, to most of us. Good evening. And I just want to sort of make an initial general statement about the whole, picture, the big picture. And you may run into people here and there that say, well, Jesus actually was a socialist. Or some will even claim that he was a communist, that he believed that everybody should share equally and so forth. And, if you run into somebody like that, I would invite you to bring him to this parable. Because the villain is not the one that takes the 5 talents and turns it into 10. That's one of the heroes, if you will, of the story. And so definitely I think we can safely say Jesus is not opposed to investing and earning from that investment. But of course what he's really getting at is, what is the motive? What is the heart of doing that? And so I'm not here to promote capitalism and say that's the Christian way, but I am here to say that we have been given things to work with, each one of us, and what we do with it is our accountability to the Lord and our opportunity to give him back. So, so let's start back at the beginning. So the master's about to leave, and he has 3 servants, and he intentionally gives one 5, one 2, and one only 1. All right? And there's a very telling phrase there, to each according to his ability. All right? So one of the things that Jesus' parables do is they invite us to put ourselves into the parable. And, if you're like me, it was many years of understanding the parable of the 2 sons, what we call the prodigal son story. It was many years before I realized, actually, I'm more like the older brother. And, so sometimes we might miss and identify with the wrong character, but I think it's very helpful for us to consider each of these, unnamed servants and consider where do we fit into that. So they've been given number of talents based on their ability. So 5 talent guy, how do you think he's feeling? Any thoughts? Confident, right? He's clearly better than these 2 bozos, right? He's getting the 5 to work with. He's demonstrated his ability, and his master has the great insight to understand how wonderful a servant he is, right? It's not too far to imagine it's going to his head very quickly. But he does, as we see, he does prove to be faithful with that. The master did the right thing to give him 5, because he turns it into another 5 and gives the 10 back. And that's not, incidental either. He didn't take 5, make 10, and give the master 8, which some people over the history has been known to do, right? He gave him everything that the master deserved. And he showed that his ability, he used it wisely, and he used it well. And he used it with loyalty. Now let me jump to the one that had only 1 talent. Can you imagine how he felt? Why bother? I'm getting no respect around here. I'm only getting 1 talent to work with. I'm probably halfway out the door. I bet when he comes back, he's planning to just fire me. I mean, that's the way I would think. Okay. Mm, mm. Right, right. Yeah, he had a pretty good understanding, at least to a point, of the master, as you said, but he had a lot of self-doubt. Yeah, yeah. His own confidence was very low, and the result was he did the absolute minimum, so that at least he would still have the talent when the master came back, right? And in his case, what did the master say you should have done? Instead of just hiding it, put it in the bank. All right? Again, Jesus is not saying don't put money in the bank, keep it in home, Go ahead and earn interest, knowing that the bank is going to use it to lend out to others, and they're going to make money in the process. But that's fine. You'll have some interest that you would have been able to give me. As it is, you're just giving me what I gave you. What was the point of that? So, so when I was reading this just the other day, what struck me as I was meditating on this passage is the one in the middle. Now, I'm kind of a middle child. Any other middle children here? Yeah? Okay. So you know how it is. The older one gets all the, attention, and they break ground. And then the younger one is the baby and gets all the oohing and ahhing. So the middle servant says, oh, boy, I could have earned the praise of getting the 5 talents. I think I could have done something with that. And so he's doing the math in his head, and he's saying, I'm getting less than half of this guy. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? But, I mean, and we're reading into this, and again, putting ourselves, human beings, how we might react. But to his credit, he took the opportunity to bless his master with what he had. He said, okay, you give me 2, I'm going to double that for you. And you might say he showed the same ability that the man with 5. And maybe the master, if he had given both of them 5, he would have ended up better off. But be that as it may, he accepted the opportunity. He made the best of the opportunity. He blessed his master, even though he may have felt he was, slighted to some extent in the beginning. So I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands on which one of these servants you identify with, because I have a feeling if you're like me, it depends on what time of day or what time of the year or, what point in life you're considering this question. Because at times, on the way up here, I was thinking about, the spiritual heritage that I have personally. Many of you know I have parents, grandparents on both sides that were strong believers and raised us as a family to love the Word, to love worship, to love God's people, and to love the people that God brought into our lives, and literally, drug addicts, prostitutes, you name it, came through our front door, and we loved on them, as well as people much higher up in society. And that's the spiritual heritage that I have. And my parents are both with the Lord now, but my siblings and I, we constantly are grateful for what we have to work with, and know that comes with a responsibility. So just like that 5 talent guy at the beginning says, oh, this is good. I've been given a lot to work with. But from him to whom much has been given, much will be required. And one of my mom's favorite sayings was, blessed to be a blessing. So that rings in our heads, all my siblings, I'm sure. We are blessed in so many ways, but to be a blessing. But at other times, I consider how I, for example, I'll read a biography of a spiritual great person, maybe, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, just to pick on an example. And he was in a very difficult situation in Nazi Germany, and influential in the church, and in particular in the church, the part of the church that was not sort of the official German church. And he was trying to provide leadership, and ultimately came to the decision that he needed to join those that were trying to overthrow Hitler. And he was ultimately tracked down, brought into prison, and right before the end of World War II was executed for his faith. And I look at a life like that, and I say, I'm not even sure I'm a one talent guy, you know, if I'm honest. Would I be able to have that courage? Would I be able to have that conviction? And, along the way, he's written things that many others can benefit from. And, I may have shared this before because this is a scene that made such an impact in my life, is that I was in a situation once, a class that Gail and I were involved in, and there was a visitor. We were there for a number of months, but somebody came just that day, and the leader of the class, got up front and introduced this brother and said, I don't remember the name, but it said this brother is part of the underground church in China. And the leader happened to know that my grandparents, my mother's parents, were missionaries to China. And so he said, John, could you come up and pray for our brother? And I still remember, walking up to the front. At first I was, glad for the opportunity, but each step that I took, the feeling that was just flooding my soul was, I need this brother to pray for me and to pray for us, because he understands obedience of faith way better than I've had opportunity to experience it here in the U.S. And, the courage, the faith, the stamina to be able to lead an underground church in China, even to this day, it takes a great deal of courage. We just in the news recently, they kind of raided this one large church that's sort of underground but very much public, and took the pastor into prison. As far as I know, he's still there, a number of the leaders, and, there's all sorts of persecution going on. The Chinese government is even increasing lately. So how would I do in that setting? Maybe I'd be worthy of a one talent. I don't know. So I think each one of us, if you kind of reflect on our own lives, there's many ways in which we have been blessed and 5 talents and maybe 1, and maybe you say, oh, well, I'll split the difference. I'll be a 2 talent person that's not too proud and it's not too humble. But the point that Jesus makes is, what do we do with what we've been given? So I don't see him anywhere here, apart from saying each according to their ability, okay? But there's no condemnation in that. That's a statement. That's a statement of fact. If we talk about cybersecurity, I don't try to pretend that I'm anywhere close to what Ken knows and couldn't tell us without killing us. So, he has talents that I don't have. None of us in this room have. And I could go around the room. Each one of us have talents. Some of you have the ability to walk up to somebody in a grocery store, start a conversation, and lead them to the Lord. I'm still working at that. I'm not, but some of you are. Some of you can go into a hospital room and know what to say. You have the scriptures for that occasion. You can pray from the heart, in the spirit, and so forth. And the point isn't so much let's compare to each other, but what have I been given? The answer that I have to do is, what am I doing with what I've been given? And so I invite each of you to consider that as well. So we mentioned the one talent person, that he knew the master, but only to a point. He only understood. He looked at his master and saw him getting results, and he sort of treated it as almost like magic. Like you're gathering where you know you didn't scatter any seed. What's up with that? And you almost might hear an accusation in there that, ooh, you must be cheating somehow, because you and it doesn't even seem to occur to this servant, no, maybe God is blessing this master, and it doesn't have to do with cheating or fraud or criminal activity at all. And again, human beings, we can compare one to another. We say, wow, how come that person has a new car and I don't? How come that person got the promotion I've been waiting for years and never got it? And so forth and so on. So where we can get tripped up is when we start to look kind of sideways at fellow servants, but rather we're meant to look to the master.